Good morning, everyone. Summer is flying by, and it's nice and steamy here in Chicago today. Welcome to the August edition of Connecting the Dots with Dr. Food. I'm Mickey French. I'm the Executive Director of CFI, if you don't know that by now. And our mission, as you know, is to help the food system build trust. Today, we're, again, as always, my co-host, I guess, or my cohort or sidekick here, David Hughes. David is a member of our Trust Insights Council, and he has a vast knowledge of the food industry at a global level, working with large major corporations and even providing moral support to his son, who has a fish and chips shack and a restaurant and an inn in the UK. So, as always, welcome, David. Nice to chat with you this morning.
Right, yeah, it's great. It's a good summer's day here. It's a nice summer's day, actually. And we're glad that we're not getting the sort of red hot European weather where it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit plus. And that's sort of winds coming off the Sahara, just making it sort of untenable, really. But our food industry remains steamy with lots of uncertainty and challenges, actually. And I'm sure we'll get an opportunity to talk about that.
Well, that's great. I mean, the heat is on in many places and in many ways. And our first topic this morning is an update on the grain crisis that we've discussed in previous webcasts here. So tell us a little bit about what's happening on your side of the world with grain.
Right, and in many respects, it's not surprising. We expected it, but but food security remains right bang at the top of the headlines in Europe, and it's led by the Russia's recent refusal to renew the Black Sea grain deal. So Ukrainian grain and oilseeds actually have to be rerouted through very expensive land routes or alternative sea routes, which aren't easy either. And plus, let's remember, it was only a week ago that Russia destroyed 60,000 tons of grain at Odessa port with a missile strike. For goodness sake, this is 2023. This shouldn't be happening. And this has certainly spooked Chicago commodity markets, amongst others. And what's more, this is sort of exacerbated this already unstable grain market because of other actions elsewhere in the world. I mean, India has banned export of rice to curb its own food price inflation at home. And that's putting their import customers in a real spin, as you can imagine. And then in Europe itself, in continental Europe, as we rather whimsically call it, there's really tough growing cereal agricultural conditions in general. And the view is that we may well see a drop of up to 50% of cereal production through this season because of the heat waves. How does this affect the food industry? Well, clearly it does. And the one measure of it is in the UK, more food and drink companies have gone out of business, gone into administration in the last 6 months of this year, so in 2023, than they did in the full 12 months of last year. So, wow. It's tough. It is tough trucking. And, to quote, give it an American tinge here, to quote Yogi Berra, remember the baseball legend and moral philosopher, it ain't over until it's over. And this food cost of living crisis is for sure not over.
Yeah. I mean, between drought, heat, global dynamics of weather, it's not going to be over for a while. And it is indeed reaching across the pond to our side of the world as well. So with so many pressure points in the food system, how are those further down the food value chain responding, and who is passing the pressure?
Right. Okay. Well, often in our market, we go back to Tesco, our largest food retailer, our sort of Walmart equivalent, if you will. And because it's the major player, but also its other competitors, they're under huge pressure from the government to, as the government would say, do something about lowering food prices, which in the UK are still, the June figure was 17% food price inflation. That's double what you guys have got. It is just edging down, but 17%, that's a big figure. So Tesco is making moves. It's trying to respond to government. And this big retailer is passing the pressure, if you will, down to suppliers. And it's reviewing all its products under a new, they call it their Fit for Growth strategy. So Tesco is reviewing its entire fresh and packaged goods product range. And it set the goal, and it's a particularly good one here, it's their goal of removing 200 billion, that's billion calories, from their private label products and making 2/3 of all its food sales in the so-called healthy category, healthy being defined by our government health department. And they say they can do this in the next 2 years. And actually, as it happens, Tesco's strategy, it sits very well with consumers. They like the idea of lower food prices, of course, and they also know that we need healthier foods, just like in the US at the moment. I mean, obesity is a big problem, which has got worse during the last 3 or 4 years, and clearly we've got to do something about it. Of course, from a supplier, if you're supplying Tesco, supplying their private label program, the threat is if you don't respond, if you don't get on board, then you might get dropped, and which is dangerous in itself. And you've got to recall too, Mickey, I know you know that Tesco has huge leverage in our market because more than half its sales by value and close to 2/3 of its sales by volume are in its own private label products, so which is way higher than you guys. Yeah. So it doesn't leave much shelf space for suppliers. You've got to. If you don't play with Tesco, then you're in real trouble.
Yeah, I mean, if 1/3 of the shelves are only available to other brands, here, I think own label is around 20% versus almost 70% at Tesco. Amazing, very different marketplace for us. So our next topic is, let's go to the fair. It's summer. So we call them our state fairs, and they are our beloved place. But you have something similar on your side of the pond. Tell us a little bit about shampooed sheep and Welsh farmers.
Right. Okay. Well, it is summer, and in the European Union, so just across the channel, everybody goes on holiday in August. Well, actually, in the UK, we all go to the local agricultural shows, as you said, to your state fairs. And late July, last week was the 4-day Royal Welsh Agricultural and Food Show. Now, this is a show which is 120 years old. It attracted, over the 4 days, 250,000 people who show up to look at livestock and to taste local food. And it's particularly livestock orientated. There's 7,000 of the prettiest livestock you would wish to see on show. And as you mentioned, half of them, 3,500, are well shampooed sheep. Also, we go there to watch horse jumping and sheepdog trials, which are my particular favorite. Those sheepdogs are so clever, the way they can handle sheep. But that's by the by. But remember, Wales, that's part of the UK, it's a small country. We have our own parliament, but it's only the size of West Virginia. There's only 3.5 million people in Wales. But mind you, we've got 10 million sheep. And I'm Welsh, born and bred here. And my grandfather was a sheep farmer, actually. And our land, it's very hilly. And it's characteristically with very tiny farms. By your measure, they're just tiny farms. But here's something you wouldn't know. Why would you? That 70% of farmer income in Wales is provided by government subsidy. Now, a farmer's just given cash or a check. No, they've got to earn that. Farmers must earn it through better environmental land practice, and they're paid actually to keep the countryside pretty and the land healthy. And believe it or not, actually, taxpayers sort of support this payment. They want to see the countryside looking smart. And because remember, by your standard, we're such a small country. I mean, the UK is a small country, and we live in our countryside, or right next to our countryside. It's not somewhere, out west. Get in the car and you're there in 5 minutes, for goodness sake. So we've got sort of unique food systems. To get the monies in Wales, all farms must have 10% of their land planted to trees. So farmers are multifaceted. On the first hand, you could say they are food producers. We produce a lot of beef and lamb, so they're food and dairy. So we're food producers, but they're also public servants. They don't like to think they are, but yes, they are. They're paid by the taxpayer. But also increasingly they're rural entrepreneurs, encouraging tourism. So I think rather like the US, there's been huge growth in glamping, for example. Yes. Or for us, particularly for the prettier farms, the ones which are on the mountainsides, farm tours, etc., have become favorable. So, it's sort of intriguing in Wales, but we like it so.
That's wonderful. I mean, we are all very far from the farm here in the US, even in Chicago, the middle of the Midwest. I still have to drive hours to get to a farm. So very interesting topic. Because we can't take questions due to recording. So today we're recording because David and I have other commitments on Thursday. So you're watching on Thursday while I'm in a board meeting. We have a couple of extra quick tidbits. So David, share with us a couple of thoughts to round out the day.
Okay, all right. Tidbit, I should say. I've talked about Brexit before. The UK exiting the EU. We all know about that now. And in doing so, the UK wanted free trade agreements of their own. We had this sort of notion that we'd be swashbuckling traders around the world. But one way or another, we've got our own free trade agreements now outside the EU, and they're with Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and some Southeast Asian countries, for example. The Pacific Partnership were part of that big deal, which you've exited for the moment anyway. But it doesn't sit easy with everybody. In July, a UK environmental campaign group sued our UK government over one of these free trade agreements. In particular, it was the one with Australia, and saying that the government didn't assess the environmental impact of the FTA, of the free trade agreement. And they charged that Australia produces much higher emissions in food production than domestic meat and dairy companies do in the UK. And it just strikes me, as we start to move towards a much greener environmental policy in many countries of the world, there'll be international trade implications. I mean, look out for spats, I would suggest, at the WTO, as countries exporting food to the UK claim unreasonable restraints to international trade. So I think that's going to be difficult.
Interesting.
Let's see what happens there.
Yep. And our final thought for today, I've spoken about many new topics since joining the Center for Food Integrity, but I never thought we would be talking about prehistoric woolly mammoths. So how does that fit with the food system?
Oh, I love this, Mickey. This is about, I loved it, a Belgian company, which is called Paleo, as in the diet. So it's called Paleo. And it's in the fake and cell-based meat business. And it's working with Sweden's, wait for it, Center for Paleogenetics. And what's it doing? It's obtained cell fragments from mammoth teeth found in the permafrost from like 1 million years old. And what's it intent on doing? It's intent on producing woolly mammoth burgers. And they view, God love them, they'll sell well at Ice Age theme parks. Now, there's a niche market if ever there was one. But it strikes me, I don't know if you will know, you'll have a rough idea of the size of woolly mammoths, much bigger than elephants. You'd get a lot of quarter pounders out of a woolly mammoth, I tell you, Mickey.
Well, as long as they aren't roaming the streets of Chicago, I think I'm okay with that. So, Well, listen, that's all the time we've got. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope to see you on September 7th for our next session of Connecting the Dots with Dr. Food. Remember to visit foodintegrity.org. Reach out to me if you have any questions about today's topics. And David, thank you as always for your time and entertaining chat.
Thank you. It's always my great pleasure. It's lovely to talk with you. Cheerio now. Bye now.
Bye-bye.